BBC Radio
6 Music.
Legends of the dance floor. A piece of paradise. Larry Levan's story.
Whatever happened to the day we met on King Street? All we ever wanted to do is sing and dance. Hey, yeah, maybe we could go back there and look for King Street. But sad as it may be, people, we never got the chance. Oh, whatever happened to the days we met on King Street?
A Piece of Paradise, Thursday's interviews. Tonight, Lenny Fontana and myself, Eddie Gordon, are interviewing DJ Paul Oakenfold in New York, DJ Heidi and DJ Harvey from Venice Beach in California, and the founding father of the global nightclub brand, the Ministry of Sound, Mr. Justin Berkman. 3 people with unique insights into the legend that was New York's Paradise Garage.
Good evening. My name is Lenny Fontana, and our first interview tonight is with legendary DJ Paul Oakenfold, who is the owner of Perfecto Records. He is one of the most sought-after international DJs in the world today. He will take you on a journey into stepping at the Paradise Garage. So here is his story.
Paul Oakenfold here. How did I find Paradise? As I recall it, I was staying in New York with a friend on 181st Street. 181st Street on the upper west side, which is above Harlem. And I was staying there with a friend of mine. His friend knew that I was into electronic music, or dance music as it was probably called in those days. And he knew I was like a young budding DJ, and that's where the door opened. He was like, you should go to this club. And he said it's all night long. There's this DJ there, Larry Levan, and I was like, I'm in. So we get there, we go into the club, and I'd never seen anything like it. It was just blew me away. I was like,
description of it. Give us a recollection of that.
It was, first of all, it was different. It was just, there were, where I came from and the clubs in England and the clubs I'd seen in New York, it wasn't a club. It was a garage, or a garage, as you guys said. And you go in, and then suddenly you got this long ramp and these flickering lights. And as you got closer, the music started to get louder and warmer, and that walkway was a really big part of it, and the lights flashing, and you knew that you was going into something different. It was dangerous, it was exciting, it wasn't the normal kind of club that I'd ever been to. And then going into it, and going into the main room, I recall being overwhelmed by the sound. It was just such a great sound system. It was like, what's a DJ? You're not thinking he's going to be up there, because the DJ was always in the clubs in England at the time, was visible in some shape and form, meaning he was at eye level. So then it was, then I would stand there and I'd just be standing there. And I really recall this because I got told off. I was standing on the dance floor looking at the DJ because I was just in awe of Larry Levan. And this guy says to me, if you're not dancing, get off the dance floor. And I looked at him and I was like, and he was right. At the end of the day, the dance floor was to dance. And that's when I really realised how serious this was being taken. This was a religion. These people were coming to this club every single week, right? And that was the beginning. I mean, and that's how I took that premise and those ideas and in some shape and form put them into my residencies. When I was the resident at Ministry of Sound when it opened with Justin, I was a resident at Cream in Liverpool, and focused on a great dance floor, a great sound system with great music. If you've got that, you're on your way to having a brilliant nightclub. And that's the premise and basis of what Paradise Garage was. It was no frills. There was no frills to me. It was a serious place to go for people who were into music, who wanted to be a great music, and the way he put his music together was incredible. Because in England at that time, you wouldn't hear the Clash rock the Casbah next to a house record. You know, and I grew up listening to all kinds of music with Radio 1, as you know. So I was very inspired by that. I liked the idea that you could take, or Larry would take, and that's the first guy I ever heard do that, these different elements and sounds, and wouldn't judge a band or a group or an artist on the colour of his skin. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. If you make a great record and he likes it, he will play it in some shape and form. He'll get into it and get out of it. That was probably my first big experience in dance music. That's the start of it. So I was going most Saturdays for the spell that I was in New York. Then I started going, I was like, well, the next step was like, how can I get in the DJ booth? Probably like yourself, you know, it's like now you're starting to peel off the layers. What is that record? Where do I go to get it? You know, and I didn't know anyone, you know, like yourself. I was just a fan and had to dig deep. So I got busy and started talking to people. There was that stairway. She went into the other room, you know this better than me. There was the steps up to the DJ booth. Yeah.
You couldn't even get in. So you had to know somebody to get in there.
I tried to get in.
And what did they do?
They wouldn't let me in. I went back to England and was totally, this is it, you know, this is what I want to do. And that was a big moment, a really big moment in my career, because it really focused me and made me want to be in the record industry and be a DJ and make music and play music. So that's kind of where it all started. And then cut to 10 years later, I had my moment. I finally got my moment with Larry Levan, because at that time, Perfecto was distributed via RCA Records. Larry was in England, and I had a little bit of a name, so I could get to Larry Levan there, no problem. So I got to him and I invited him to my office, and because Perfecto was distributed via RCA had a record that was signed. It was DJ Steffi. It was an Italian record. Larry was in town. I was in a position to give him or to commission a remix. So I was like, I've got to get Larry Levan to do this. This is it. This is the moment. So I got in touch and I was like, I've got a record. It's an Italian import. It's been doing really well, but I need a remix on it. Could you come to the office and hear it? So this was my moment. I meet Larry Levan. He comes into the office. He sits down, and this was the greatest thing about the meeting, because I'll never forget this to the day I die. I'm sitting here, you know, obviously I'm sitting in front of my desk, and my two speakers obviously are here facing me. So he comes in and he sits the other side of the desk where you're sitting, and I go to put the track on. And he goes, whoa. So I turned it off. So then he gets up, he comes over to the speakers and he starts rearranging the speakers. Obviously because he wants them pointing to him. So he's now rearranged the speakers. He's done a little bit of EQing, you know, because I've just got everything at 12 o'clock. So he's put a little bit more top on it. And set it up the way he wants it. And then I realised how professional he was. So I play him the track, and he's like, great, you know, I love it. I can do what I do with it. And then we commissioned the studio. He did the mix, and that was it. It was like, I had a great Larry Levan mix. I put the buzz out there, and of course everyone who knew who Larry Levan was were all freaking out. I think that was the last mix he ever did before he passed away. So I was very fortunate to meet him in my environment and talk to him. I asked him a bunch of questions about the club, about his setup. I think he had a stick. His headphone was like a lollipop, right? Like a lollipop, better interpretation of it. And it would just be held like that, and the whole presence of, and then meeting him, and he had. I don't know if you can ever capture those moments again, because he really instilled what a true resident DJ should be all about. There every week, not once a month, breaking music, and I took the premise of what he'd done, especially with Cream. Every week there was just a great song that come along with me. It'd be Peach Boys, then it was D-Train, on Prelude, and then, it was these tracks. It was like every week there was just a killer track.
I said this to others. If he didn't have that club the way he had it, we never would have seen like a Yoko Ono Walking on Thin Ice become a huge record.
Larry was playing that music. See, he took chances, but what he was different. Maybe it's his way. Some people would see it, playing the Clash and playing Yoko Ono was different to him. I think it was just, he saw music in, if it's a great track and I like it and I can play it, that's what it's all about. I mean, that's the experience I got from it, was this is a great space, a great sound system with a great DJ, and he was all about playing really good music rather than saying, well, that's rock, I can't play that, I can't play this, I can't play that. He went into it with his eyes wide open, and I don't think he, and I don't know, I could be completely wrong, but I don't think he judged music like that. I think it was just, he judged music on if it really worked through his floor, then that's the way it is, and I want to play it.
You are listening to Legends of the Dance Floor, the Larry Levan story, a piece of paradise.
Larry Levan story.
Eddie Gordon and myself, Lenny Fontana, took a trip to Venice Beach, California to meet up with DJ Harvey and DJ Heidi to get their story of their time meeting Larry Levan, and what an amazing DJ he was, and a larger-than-life character. So now, they will tell you their story.
My name's Harvey William Bassett, aka DJ Harvey.
I'm Heidi. Yeah, sometimes DJ Heidi, again, through the resurrection of the DJ career. But I've worked with Harvey for more years than we would care to mention.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heidi and Harvey. First up, could you both recount your experiences with DJ Larry Levan, his time in London with you in those months before he passed, and the impression he left on you?
Big question.
I was going to say huge.
So talk on the personal side.
I mean, I think as a character, the persona, he was a larger-than-life character.
Well, an interesting story, I mean, the night that he played at Moist, you and I left to go set up the club, and he wanted to get more sleep, so he was back at the apartment, like, I'm gonna get more sleep, I'll turn up a little later. And we're like, yeah, of course, because we had to leave early because we would take the sound in. And I don't know, it started approaching midnight, and I was concerned, like, where's Larry? Oh my God, he's fallen asleep. I'm gonna have to go get him. We had a house phone. I kept calling it. And, no answer. And just when I was thinking, God, he's like going to sleep right through, he's not going to turn up, he waltzed in, and he was completely sober. Remember, that was his whole deal that night. So he went immediately to DJ pretty much. I think he played 12 to 6 or something. And it was he declared afterwards that it was the first time he DJ'd completely sober in years that he could remember, of drugs or whatever. And not that he wasn't looking for some at some point, I recall. And then once he kind of got the vibe or got the feeling, I've never experienced anything like it. We closed the doors and we were all down there enjoying ourselves. And afterwards he said, I've never DJ'd like that in many years, and especially not straight, and he was really working that system, wasn't he?
What did Larry do when he played Don't Leave Me This Way that impressed you?
I never heard Don't Leave Me This Way.
Slam, what was it? Fall to the Bar, Slam. Still playing that, man.
Yeah. That's
a big one right now.
He played 2 copies of that, didn't he? Harv will explain
Didn't turn the volume up until the end.
Until working volume, just the volume control. And as a total laid party person, and I'm clean, serene. I was no alcohol, no anything. Just feeling emotions like never before. The DJ booth at Moist was on the floor, and you're the same eye level as the people that you're playing for. So that definitely had a big effect, I think, on him, because maybe, had he not have had that connection, that first hour of his set, which was kind of a little wishy-washy and all over the place, might have been how his night continued. But he was definitely getting a lot of energy, I think, from the crowd.
A common theme from lots of the interviews we've done so far is that Larry would communicate with the people on the dance floor via the choice of songs he played.
100%. I bet you could tell how his day had gone. That first night at the Ministry of Sound I'll never forget it. That it's never sounded as good. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work at the Ministry of Sound at that time as well, each weekend. And with him setting the sound, it had never sounded as good. And once Larry was no longer around to do that, people like Harvey know how to adjust the speaker an inch to the left, and then he would literally walk in that room, which is the hexagonal room, and it had, the big speaker stacks all the way around, and he would run over to one speaker stack. The Ministry was perfect the night it opened, and the sound was perfect, the lights were perfect, there was no overhead lighting whatsoever.
There was actually a very good engineer in place at the time, a guy called Pod.
Something like that.
And he was so good that he didn't have to do anything because he'd said it right. And because he sat in the office not looking like he was doing anything, they sacked him. So then the next guy that came in that went, oh no, this is going to cost you 60 grand to sort out, and it was perfect.
It was perfect.
And they were like, oh well, God, it's going to cost us 60 grand to sort out, we better have that done, So they started sawing baffles off the speaker enclosures.
Yeah, he would run around
mid-range, screaming there, oh, that's like 15 dB louder, lovely. And it just became brutal.
This is after Justin, we should say.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, Justin would have been wise enough not to know.
And then they digitised the system, and then it was a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah, it never sounded the same. We had no idea. It was a juice bar as well. There was no alcohol available. And yeah, the room itself was phenomenal. The lights all came from the floor, which was something I'd never seen before, and I loved it. No lights coming from above the dance floor, above your head at all. Everything was on the floor, kind of pointing up to this, the mirror ball and everything else. It was the first time ever in my life I'd had tweeters suspended above my head, and that blew my mind completely. The fact that the sound system was hitting, where you resonating with the parts of your body that you hear sound in. So, you hear the highs higher up and the bass closer to the floor and the mids in the middle. That blew my mind, and just having Larry or Justin or whoever was playing Harv just isolate everything, as well. It was the first time I'd ever heard anything like that. So certainly London had never had anything like that before. And I remember, people like Terry Farley, we would just look at one another and laugh. Because we what else can we do? Just looking, huge smiles and just laughing wow, we are here in heaven. This is it. This is what clubs are supposed to be like. I mean, I really do. I remember your face and Terry Farley's face. That's it. just like not believing what we were hearing.
Do you recall Larry playing any left-of-centre records?
I think the stuff like the ESG stuff and liquid stuff was actually being played in kind of like indie clubs and stuff. It was like proto-punk or post-punk, like so almost like new romantic almost kind of stuff, and it fit into that as a sort of proto-electro-punk crossover kind of thing. And that was, I mean, I suppose that happened with hip-hop too. You know, you've got Blondie hanging out with Grandmaster Flash, with Africa Bambaataa. I can't remember, there was some this hip chick that put on the club where you know, Uptown met Downtown and all that kind of thing was going on. I think, you know, the first time White Lies came out, you know, it was just life-changing. It's it's a heavy subject with a pop sensibility and like a sort of a retake on a proto-punk beat. You know, it's like unbelievable. But
it went to number 1, didn't it, in England?
Yeah,
like
I believe so.
Sure.
So it's, but I mean, you know, I think the not the ultimate, but the record that really sort of says Larry all over is Macho City, with Steve Miller Band. And because it's a pure heavy rock psych freak out with the biggest backbeat you've ever heard, down tempo. I was like, now I see everything. I understand. Like that's it right there. That's the mother lode as far as my feeling for the garage. To have something, to have your downtown gay crowd dancing to a half-tempo psychedelic rock jam. Like 13 minutes of it or something. Just mind blowing. Got a crowd that are inquisitive. They want to have fun too. To really play the crowd and hurt them and play with them and treat
like
treat
and
them
reward.
And, like the carrot and the stick, you know. And that donkey's gonna do whatever you want.
Actually, he talked about that. That's one thing he did talk about, was about like punish and reward. You know, it's like, we're going to punish them with this, but then those that are still on the dance floor will get the reward of this.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember him telling that story, and it was very much that, you know, like, this will weed out the people that aren't really here to dance, you know, like, we'll hurt them. Let's hurt them a little bit, and then let's, like, give them some screaming
Give them some space when the next one comes on.
I worked there. Justin was still there at the point that I worked there. Justin and Humphrey. And, you know, James financed the Ministry of Sound as a purely silent financier. And then, you know, Justin was kind of ousted, really. And he would come into the office every once in a while and visit. And, you know, it was perfectly cordial. You know, everyone was cordial with him. I really had so much respect for him. But I worked there, you know, after a little while. I loved working there. It was a fantastic, you know, ship to be in control of, if you want, you know, we were very into the kind of American DJ culture at that time and booking American DJs, or they were, and, you know, then we did our Friday night kind of English night, Saturday night, you know, kind of more American night.
Thank you, Heidi and Harvey. Next we go to Justin Berkman in a great interview with Lenny Fontana. I personally remember Justin coming to see me in the South East London recording studio in 1991 with fellow DJ Bert Bevan to tell me that they were going to open this huge nightclub in the area for house music before they even had a name for the venue. Here is an incredible account of how that inspiration from the Paradise Garage came about.
Legends of the dance floor, a piece of paradise. Larry Levan story. Story.
The social climate. When I arrived in New York, basically, New York was, shall we say, at the end of its mad period. It was very much like the. You know, having come from London, which was quite a sedate place at the time. Came to New York, and it was very much like the film Warriors. It was completely insane, seemed fairly lawless. It was just a crazy town, and anything went. And you know, I lived in various different parts of New York. I lived in Queens, I lived in Harlem, I lived in Hell's Kitchen, and then I ended up living in the West Village. And, you know, it was a town that taught you how to walk like a pimp on the street, so that you could, you know, not end up being mugged. You know, it taught you how to strut your shit, and, you know, trying to get, you know, it was a serious place. It was very, very exciting for a 23-year-old. It was the most incredible place I could have been, I have to say. I was on my way around the world, but I ended up, you know, my first stop was New York, and I never went any further. I didn't need to. And I think, you know, one of the nights that really was the epitome of kind of New York was the night that the Mets won the World Series. Yeah, 86. I just arrived. I just arrived in the West Village, and this guy who was a native New Yorker who was living in Los Angeles came back to New York, and a friend of his was an undercover cop. And he lent us he was sick with pneumonia in bed, and he lent us his car. It was a Chevrolet Monte Carlo, undercover plainclothes police car. And we were driving around town with the sirens on and the flashing lights, you know, going through the red lights, which everyone else was doing, because it was just, you know, the whole city just went completely mad. And that was the night I ended up at Nell's. We met a couple of girls, and we were at the booth in back of Nell's, and I was sitting there, and all of a sudden one of the girls goes, "Oh my God, my husband!" And I was like, "What husband?" And she turned around, there was these two huge guys walking to us, and the smaller one was Mike Tyson, and the bigger one was the husband. And I looked around, and my friend Wayne had just disappeared. He just beamed himself up, I think. And it was just one of those crazy nights, and that was kind of the epitome of what New York was like. But living down in the West Village was a vibe of relative peace, albeit a very, very sad and frightened area, because obviously what was going on with AIDS at the time, I think, you know, we'd missed the crazy days, but it still was, you know, incredibly vibrant, and but you could tell there was a tinge of real fear in the streets of people, you know, with people dropping left, right, and centre. So it was a bit like living in a war zone, even though the bombs were flying around was actually a virus rather than actual bombs and bullets. So, you know, but living in the West Village was perfect because, you know, we were close access to Nell's, which we went to every week, and then every Saturday night we would go to the garage, and that was, you know, it was crazy. Well, I even was lucky enough to go down to Coney Island. I think it was in the winter because it was absolutely empty. And I went on the Cyclone, which was, I don't know, built in the 20s or something, and it was the most rickety, beaten-up old ride that you could go on the planet. And it was the most exciting. It was, you got on it and you just knew that you were going to die. It wasn't one of these amazing, technically built ones nowadays that, you know, does 16 Gs and turns upside down twice. This thing just rattled like crazy, and you knew. Yeah, you just knew you were going to die, you know, and I was just absolutely terrified beyond my wits. And as soon as I got off, I got back on and had another ride. It was just the best. Yeah, no, that was mad. It was mad times, brilliant as well. And I'm really, really pleased I saw it, because I know that, you know, quite soon afterwards with the change of the mayor, because I was there with the Dinkins Koch area. So as soon as Giuliani came in, New York was just, you know, turned upside down. But I was lucky enough to see that end game. Okay, Garage found Justin Berkman, really, because at the time I was working as a bartender at Yellowfingers. And, you know, New York being what it was, especially in those days, it was, you know, a mecca for actors, and there was a bunch of kids there who were saying to me, you know, I was talking to them about what I was doing in London, which was, you know, all the rave scene going on there. The family functions, Soul to Soul and Shake and Finger Pop parties, which were the big events in North London back in sort of 84, 85. And was effectively the nucleus for the rave scene that happened sort of towards 87, 88, 89, that era. So I was telling them about that, and they were saying to me, you know, you have to go to the Garage, you have to go and check this place out. It is absolutely, you know, it's just an amazing space. So I went down there on a Friday, And I got straight in, and I was walking around. I was probably the only white guy in there, and I was getting bumped and jostled around by people. And I was not having a nice time in there, and I couldn't see what everyone was going on about. Yes, it was an amazing club, but the vibe was really, really aggressive towards me. I was just about to leave, and a kid comes up to me and says, "Hey, you shouldn't be here today. You should come tomorrow. Tomorrow night's much better. You'd be safer. You'd have a much better time." So I was like, cool, okay, whatever. So I went back the next night, walked in the door, and the guy said to me at the door, the picker, he said to me, "You know this is a gay club?" And I was like, no, I didn't know. I didn't realise at that stage it was a gay club on a Saturday. So he was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, you can't come in." Okay. So I went home, and then the week later I went back and I tried again, and I got rejected again. And then my friend Jimmy, who'd been living in Los Angeles, finally moved to New York. He was an old school friend of mine, and I told Jimmy, I said, "Jimmy, we've got to go to the garage. I've heard this place is off the hook. We've got to check it out." I said, "But it's a gay night." He was like, "Yeah, whatever, no problem." So we went down. As soon as we walked through the door, he capped it up, put his arm around me. He capped it up, and the guy looked at us and goes, "Okay, fine, you can go in. You know, you've done enough. You're cool. Enjoy." So yeah, that was it, and from there it was just walking up that ramp and seeing it in a completely different set of eyes. The vibe in there and the whole situation was completely different from that Friday when I didn't really appreciate what it was. Being unaware of sort of the unwritten rules of garage, we'd gone there very, very early. We'd probably gone there at about 12:30 when the club had just opened. So we walked up the ramp, which was already very exciting because the entrance was incredible. This ramp going up with the little egg strobes flickering up each side of the wall, which gave you this kind of runway feel of going up. And you get to the top, and there was this little booth. It was a bit like a sort of what do they call the Coen brothers movie? It was a bit like that, with this little old lady sitting behind this tiny little arch window, and you pay your bucks, and then she'd give you a ticket, and you'd go in. It was just already going into some sort of surreal theatre or something, or a cinema. You walk through the door, and the place was relatively empty at this stage because it was early in the evening. So we kind of walked in and we walked round. I think we initially probably went into the crystal room, which was the room directly in front of you, which was quite bright. So we'd walk in there, walk around there, which was effectively just a wall of a crystal wall, sort of lit blue, and really nothing in there, no sound system. I think just benches around the edge, and then sort of walked into the dance floor, and it was just probably about 20 or 30 guys sort of putting the talcum powder on the floor and starting to spin out and just dance. Everyone sort of in certain spots, and the music was probably, I don't really remember what was playing. It was definitely disco at this point. It was just, the sound was already, it wasn't at its obviously optimum peak because it was early in the evening, but you could already hear through, with the sub bass going through the floor and just the clarity of the sound, that this was a remarkable room. And even with no one in it, it sounded tight as hell. So, we would just walk through there and then walk through the back into the bar area. Of course, there were all those banquette seating, the long bar with just bowls of juice on it and stuff like that, and fruit. And no sort of bartenders. It was quite a different vibe to anything I'd seen before. Basically walking through the cinema, which is a very simple, basic room with just block seating, showing movies that were coming out in the cinemas or just after. So it was like an up-to-date cinema. It wasn't showing sort of old skanky videos. It was it was proper stuff. I remember seeing a couple of really cool movies in there. I think I saw one of the early Star Trek movies. I remember one night seeing the Three Amigos in there, and I don't think I've ever laughed so much in all my life. And then through there you would go through the back, up the stairs through a fire exit, and then there was the roof garden, which was just this amazing wooden platformed space, which you could, if you packed it out, you could get a couple of hundred people up there. And it was just, it was brilliant. It occurred to me quite quickly that this was just a genius club, because you had a sort of a room where there was no music, but just lots of light. Then you have the really brilliantly designed and brilliantly sounded dance area. Then you would have a bar area which you can go and sit in with a bar that you just go up. There was no bartender, so you didn't have to wait. You just helped yourself to a ladle full of juice or whatever, or you take a piece of fruit, and then I think there was coffee and biscuits and stuff like that. Then there was a cinema where you could chill out, and then there was an open area where you could get some air. So it was kind of, to me, there were these elements where you had all the different extremes of what you needed in a club. But there were certain records that when they were played, it meant that there was a spike punch that had come out. With the punch, the dance floor would empty. Someone, he would put on a record, and all of a sudden half the dance floor would clear, and it wasn't actually because the record was bad, it was because it was party time, and people would go in the back and have the punch. And of course, again, that's another element of genius, because you've got the entire club all on the same vibe, which, to anyone that's ever DJ'd, if you know that everyone is on the same buzz and the same high at the same time, all in parallel, you can do a lot with that, a lot more than if everyone's just randomly, different states of mind. So that was just another element of the absolute genius that this club was. But, having studied it and gone to it for over a year and been there week in, week out and seen it in various levels of consciousness myself, I realised that this was a club that had been designed by an absolute genius, someone who had designed it from the inside out, had worked out what was needed to keep the people entertained, excited and dancing for the entire night. And that's what Michael Brody had done. He really is sort of the unsung hero. Everyone talks about Garage, they talk about Levan, they talk about other people, but Brody, I think, was the person who, as far as I can tell, was really the sort of the person who created that playground for people like Levan and the others to make the art and the beauty that they did. He created the canvas, and then everyone else painted on it. No, I wouldn't say it was a college for me. It was more than that. It was more of a religious experience. It was like discovering God. It was a church. It was a much deeper experience than just going to college and being taught. Of course, when you're a religious scholar, that's a form of schooling, but it's a much deeper and more intense version. And you don't wake up in the morning every morning and think, I'm really looking forward to going to school, or college. But if you're a complete religious nut, then you can't wait to go to church on Saturday and do your thing, or to mosque on Friday and do your thing. And that's the way it was for us. When we went to the Garage, it was never a question, are you going to go this weekend? It was just a question, when are you going? What time are you going? It wasn't a question of whether you'd go or not. It was compulsory to yourself. But yes, it taught me so much. It taught me a lot about myself, and it taught me a lot about what I wanted to do, because at that point I was kind of confused. I didn't really know where I was going in my life. I had a feeling I knew, but it hadn't been clarified. And then going into that place and I saw it, I just wanted to have something similar. I wanted to play there, but I also wanted to be involved, and obviously that became very much the case when it closed, and then I decided to bring it back to England. Yeah. I mean, when we started hearing that the Garage was closing, it was like, no, that can't happen. No way, And it was, it was a bit like when you hear that someone's terminally ill. It was like, you go through all the different things of denial and panic and anger and all this kind of stuff. And we started thinking to ourselves in very childish, naive way of how we could take the club over and whether we could take on the lease, and why don't we do it? Why don't we run it? A couple of completely off their heads English boys who thought that they could take something like that on without actually really understanding what was involved. But that was the reaction that we had. It was pure panic. We couldn't understand what life would be like if it did close. That was just not acceptable. So yeah, there was that thing. But musically, and in that period, as far as I'm aware, Levan was actually not playing that much on the Saturday nights. He was playing mostly on the Friday nights. And and so effectively we were getting a lot of Joey Janos de Pino. So the real house fan and the person who's really playing the most of the house stuff. Yes, it was kind of a sort of a closed circuit of the same tunes. but those 20 or whatever tunes, 30 tunes they were, you know, what turned me on. Because I have to say, I liked the disco, but what really blew my head off was house. I mean, I'd been into music up to a certain level, and then when I heard my first house record, that's when I went crazy for music and to be a DJ and all this kind of stuff. So what the DJ that I really appreciated down there more than anything, I think, was David in that sort of, let's say, 9 to 3 months prior to a closing. And then I think Levan started playing towards the end, because obviously when the rumours were flying around that it's going to close, I think he started getting more involved on the Saturday nights. And of course that was Vorzon and this kind of thing, you know, it was just elements that you just would never ever, no DJ in their right mind would ever even attempt. And that's why I think he's become such a huge legend, because he just didn't care, and that was the brilliance of it. Yeah, I think the thing is that it was one of these clubs where the DJ booth, and it was a bit like when we built Ministry, it was the same. The DJ booth was kind of virtually hidden away. You could, if you went to the right part of the dance floor, see who was DJing. But, you know, there was quite a lot of parts of the dance floor where you couldn't see who was playing. And in any case, we were always sitting on the speaker stack in front of the DJ. So, you know, we were looking out, having the kind of the same view the DJ had from lower down. So I wasn't always that aware of who was playing, but I know Larry was definitely up there, and I know that, you know, Victor was, and that Joey was, and that David was. You know, I remember seeing the four of them up there. But, you know, they all added different vibes and different elements to it. And, you know, when you're in a club for, you know, a long time, you know, more than sort of 3 or 4 hours, it's good to have that break up and that thing. But they're all people that have worked together and lived together and you know, educated each other. So there was a common thread through it. The weekend at the closing, first of all, we you know, when we knew that it was definitely closing and the invite came through the post, because being a member, you know, we used to get all the flyers and not so much flyers, but the sort of the schedule of who was singing, who the PAs were, because they, you know, they never ever flew the DJ roster. That was never mentioned. It was not mentioned anywhere. Even when you walked through the door and the thing, they had that board up with all the names. It was always PA. It was always who was singing. So I remember that flyer coming through, and it was Liz Torres. And I forget who else it was now, but it was an amazing lineup. But it was like, God, this is Endgame. It was the final night. I've still got the flyer, and you know, obviously, I you know, all the people, because you know, living as 3 English guys living in New York, all of our friends from London would regularly come over and hang with us, and so they could go to the garage and check it out. You know, we were night opening as far as I can remember, and it was already mad. I mean, the queue was crazy. The line to get into the club was actually all the way around the block. It actually started where the door was. You know, New York City blocks are pretty big. That was one hell of a wait to get in. We put ourselves up in the roof garden, and we stayed up there for quite a while, where you could hear the music through the roof, so you could check out what was going on. I remember, I think a couple of hours in, I'd started to go to the toilet, and I think it took me 3 hours to go about 100 meters. It was just rumours that I heard at the time that they had 14,000 people in there, and it was the same size club as Ministry, so it was about 1,500 capacity, and I think they had 14,000 people in there at once. Although that may be, you know, that may not be accurate, but it certainly felt like it. You know, it took me 2 PAs to walk across the dance floor to go to the toilet. God knows I didn't wet myself. It was amazing. We were there. We stayed there until about 9 in the evening. So we were there about you know, 9 to 18 hours, whatever that is. No, 21 hours. We were there 21 hours. So, and that was enough. I wish I'd stayed till the end, but you know, just I couldn't do it. Well, I moved back to London, February '88. New York had died with the garage. When the garage closed, I remember seeing a couple of people I knew from the garage walking around the streets, you know, buying records and stuff, and trying to be a DJ. And I'd see these people and I'd talk to them, and it was depressing. It was really depressing. It was like everyone had lost the most important person in their life, and it was like just a non-stop wake. It was quite depressing. And you know, and then winter hit, and the party was over for me, and it was time to leave. So February '88, I left. I went back to London. I actually met Larry quite shortly before Ministry was opening. There was a year of me going to clubs and trying to be a DJ in London, starting from scratch again. that there is some seriously valid stuff going on over here. It was the Summer of Love of '87, which I missed. I came in 88, and then I saw the second Summer of Love, and we were going to all of the big raves, the Back to the Futures, the Sunrises, all this kind of stuff. And it was, you know, it was a remarkable scene. The stuff that was going on was brilliant, and it was, and you know, I wanted to get involved. I wanted to be a part of it because, you know, I'd seen what I'd done. Like every single young DJ thought I was the best DJ on the block, and I had an absolutely God-ordained right to be in that DJ booth playing. And why wasn't I getting booked and this kind of stuff? Just like every single young DJ thinks, and not just the young ones as well. These raves are incredible, and they kind of went quite quickly from being really cool to being really dark. And there was some situations where the club scene kind of got really, really nasty, or the rave scene got really nasty, and it all sort of came to a point when there was a gig down in Reigate when the security had a battle with the police in the street outside the rave, and I got threatened with a gun. I was about to DJ, and a guy pulled a gun on me so that I wouldn't DJ and he could play instead of me. And I just thought to myself, enough's enough, I got to do something about this. And then I started just through friends and contacts, I started the project working with Palumbo and Humphrey Waterhouse, building the Ministry. So fast forward a year, you're just about to get the Ministry open. And, you know, for me, the whole thing about Ministry was that it was effectively, let's say, 80% garage and 15% a mix of a little bit of Nels, a little bit of Area, a little bit of, you know, maybe not the Saint, even though I'd like to have got a bit of the Saint in there because I always thought the Saint was such a brilliant, brilliant club. But, you know, elements of these different clubs in New York that I'd seen melded together with maybe 5% of, you know, some bits in England. And that's what Ministry effectively was. And so for me, you know, Levan being my, you know, hero and the person that had sort of stimulated all this situation, for me it was critical that he came over and played. I wanted him to stamp his authority, to, you know, like a dog piss on the post, and, you know, it was, you know, he'd been there. So it was really, yeah, that was a critical thing for me. So I went to New York in search of Larry, having already been to New York a couple of times during the building of Ministry to meet with Austin about the sound system and stuff like that. So I think, you know, how I met Larry was kind of just at random. I was down at, I think it was the Shelter at that point. It was the club that was Area, and it was then Shelter, and I think it became Body and Soul, and I think at that point it was Shelter. I just remember I was walking around the club, but I forget who I was with. It could have been with Austin, I just don't remember. But I remember that there was this guy asleep on a sofa, and that was Levan. So I just sat there and waited for him to wake up. And when he finally came round, I sat there and I just, you know, said to him, you know, I went to the garage, I was a core member, I went there for a year, you know, and when it closed, you know, I felt what it meant. And decided to you know, try and build a facsimile club, something similar in London, and that I really wanted him to, you know, come and be a part of it, you know, come and play. And he was, you know, he gave me his contact, his manager, who was a Japanese guy, gave me his contact, and you know, we put it together. So he was coming over to play, and he was supposed to play, I think the second week I think he was supposed to play. The first week we had some European guys play, and then he was supposed to, I think, come out the second week, and he missed 7 flights in 7 days. I think he went to the airport each day and missed a flight, rebooked the flight, next day missed it, and that happened 7 days in a row. And finally, I think on the Saturday, I can't remember the date, I think it was the 19th of October, he got the plane and he arrived in London. I think Victor had already arrived early. I can't remember if Victor was here with him. I think I'm pretty sure Victor was with him, but he had arrived early. He had got on the plane. I was like, all right, Larry, where are your records? He was like, I haven't got any records. I was like, okay, all right, you got a DJ tonight, dude. He was like, it's not a problem. And basically what he did is he went and borrowed records. I think he played with some of Victor's, obviously because Victor was his sort of like his so-called apprentice or whatever, his backup DJ. So he used Victor's records. We went to Catch a Groove, and he borrowed some sort of vocal house and stuff like that from Jeremy Newell. That evening we went to dinner to Harvey, DJ Harvey, who gave him all sort of the eclectic weird stuff. And then he borrowed some of my stuff, which was the sort of like the harder edge stuff, and played. And you know, for me, that was the icing on the cake and the cherry on top. You know, it was, you know, getting Larry to come and DJ in my club, and he'd never been to the UK. In fact, he'd never played in Europe before. So it was a glorious moment, and it was you know, it was a moment when you just think, you know, I've finally done it. I've gone from kid on dance floor in New York in this amazing club, absolutely in love with everything that's going on. Club disappears, come back home, recreate club, bring Starr from club to yours to stamp his authority on it and to make it an official part of that family. And he loved it, and he loved it so much. Instead of staying for a weekend, he stayed for 3 months.
Legends of the dance floor, a piece of paradise. Larry Levan story.
But we got to about 80 to 90%. When we first opened, let's say 80%. You know, a dozen DJs that played on that sound system. But up until that point, it was like it was in black and white. Not because we noticed it, because if you've only seen black and white TV all your life, you don't know anything else. When Levan started, when he put his hands on the mixer and put on the first record, which was a Gwen Guthrie tune, it just went to colour. And the whole sound system just lit up, and it just became living. It was a living sound system all of a sudden. And what can I say? You know, all of a sudden the people went crazy. You know, it was just a completely. It was just, for me, it was just like being in the garage again. You know, all of a sudden there I am, I'm listening to great music, and all of a sudden I'm back in the garage, and it is that ability for Levan to manipulate the sounds and turn it into a living feature, a living beast. And, you know, through the time that he was there, I talked to him about this, and I was like, you know, what is this? What is it you do with the bass and the treble? I mean, all this stuff, because, you know, Timmy Rangersford would do it, and other DJs would do it, but there was something about Levan's manipulation of the sound that he said that it was... Yeah, it was something about his manipulation of sound that was just beyond everyone else, really. It was just, it was like an actor taking prose and making it into a piece of, into theatre. Oh, well, I mean, the classic story of that is the Finally story. I mean, when he played C.C. Peniston Finally for 45 minutes. I mean, it's a famous story now, but, you know, there he was playing 45 minutes back to back. He had I think he had one copy of it, and he was using the tape machine to mix it and start from scratch. And he played it for 45 minutes. And then, you know, when he mixed in the next record that wasn't Finally, everyone went, oh, Finally, and then they got the joke. And he just punished them for 45 minutes just to make them laugh. And of course, that was his genius. He was crazy, and he teased everyone, and he punished people, and then he would reward them. You know, it was maybe my psychology when it came to DJing was slightly different. Mine was always about going up the river in Apocalypse Now to meet Colonel Kurtz. So mine was all about the descent into insanity, and then, you know, escape at the end. And then, you know, with an extra scene that isn't in the film, which is, you know, the explosion of joy and all that kind of stuff. But Levan was even more than that. It was about punishing, it was about teasing, it was about giving and taking away, it was all this kind of stuff. Tuning the sound system with Larry was an experience in itself. We would take the EQs, the 32 or whatever band EQs they were, and put them in the middle of the dance floor. Put on you know, the records that we knew really, really well, and then just sit there and you know, EQ it, and then move the speakers a little bit here and a little bit there, one degree left, one speaker a couple of inches back or a little bit to the right. It was just, you know, getting these things into the right position so that the cancellation was gone, so that we had bass everywhere, so there was no hot spots or cold spots, that it was uniform. Nowadays you've got that system that Maya used, that map online stuff, so you just stick it in there and it will work it out for you, you know, in a computer. But in those days we just did it manually, and it was frustrating because you could get really close to perfection and all of a sudden you move a speaker and you'd lose it again. So it was, you know, moving 6 speaker stacks around trying to get, you know, a uniform sound is nigh on impossible, and we spent weeks doing it, and it was great fun. And that's when I really, really learned, you know, the most of the stuff that, you know, he taught me. And he was a very, very open guy who wanted to teach, and he wasn't that vicious, bitchy queen that everyone claimed him to be back in the days. And I'm sure when he was at the peak of his power in New York, he was probably quite nasty. I know that I was. You know, when you have a lot of power, you can tend to be quite nasty, especially when you're not entirely have all your faculties. But when he was in London, he was a really sweet guy, and he was really keen to share what he had and what he knew. He wanted to teach. He wanted to share that information. So it was great time spending with him, and he taught me a lot. And then the other things we did with him is, I introduced him to Paul Oakenfold, who got him doing a couple of remixes. And then, of course, I sent him out to Germany. He did a couple of gigs in Germany as well, which is, kind of unmentioned anywhere. But he played in Munich for a friend of mine, Rene, and just went around town causing havoc, going into record stores. He was a regular at Catch a Groove where I was as well. And when he came in, it was just a riot, and we'd have loads of screams and giggles. He's a funny guy. When he was a little bit, low on juice, he was pretty grumpy. But when he was, on form, he was an extremely entertaining, very comical guy. Yeah, without Garage, there would have been no Ministry. Well, I wouldn't have. First of all, I probably wouldn't have gotten to. You see, that as great as all these other clubs are, just to give you that example again, but Saint I went to once, and Garage I went to, 65 times, 70 times. Area I went to 3-4 times. The only place I went to more than Garage was Nels, but that was because it was, kind of our local, and it was the weekly day thing. And Nels was really cool. It was a great place. But there's no way that Nels would have stimulated Ministry. Ministry was a rehash and a reinvention and a sort of an evolutionary step onwards from what Garage was. So there's no question that Garage created Ministry. And without one, there wouldn't have been the other. I don't think there was a particular eureka moment with Ministry. It was a gradual build-up of. First of all, look. This is the first time I thought about doing something like Ministry was when Garage was closing, because we were thinking about taking the club over. As mad as that and ridiculous as that was to consider, but that was our first sort of reaction, desperate reaction to the fact that we were losing it, privy to a moment in time that many people. Dream to have been involved in, and hence we're sitting here talking about this now, because it was that important, it was that remarkable, and I was very, very, very fortunate to have been involved, to have been there. And of course, when the Garage was closing, we were like, this can't happen. It happened, and we came back. From that moment on, I was looking for a way of doing something, and I wanted to create something. I didn't think at that stage I was going to build Ministry of Sound, what it was, but I wanted to create something. I wanted to have some of that again. I didn't want, it was, it's like if you lose a girlfriend, all of a sudden you start looking for another one, but you're trying to find maybe the one, especially if it was the one that blew your mind, you're going to start looking for one that was very similar, and you'll never find it. What maybe broke that was, going to all the raves and just talking to people. I had a really good friend, a guy called Ray Maudsley, who I would see on a regular basis, and I'd go around his place and we would just chat about it. In fact, he was the guy that introduced me to James and Humphrey. So, there was a lot of discussion around there, and I would just, tell them kind of what, we're talking about now, the experience of what it was like, what the place was, and what was going on in New York, and the whole vibe of New York. And then, once the project started, and we went to the next level of building a room that was acoustically perfect for that system. Garage, Al Farstein had EQ'd the room, but we'd gone the next level of actually building the room to sit the speakers in. So it was 5-sided, no parallel walls, but it's different level ceilings, and one of the most important things is the fact that it was a magnesite block, a very rough, nasty brick, big heavy brick, that not only kept the sound inside the box, but also when the sound hit it, it would just refract into a billion waves because it was so rough. Obviously, apart from maybe some of the subs, but it was, the whole thing was that design. So it was a process. There wasn't, all of a sudden I was sitting there on a bus and I thought, I got to build Ministry. The only eureka moment I had with Ministry was the logo.
That amazing interview by Lenny with Justin closes Thursday's Piece of Paradise show for Legends of a Dancefloor. Thank you to Paul Oakenfold, Heidi, Harvey and Justin Berkman. Friday's Legends of a Dancefloor edition of A Piece of Paradise has accounts and interviews from Vinyl Mania Super Selector and DJ Manny Lehman, Beach Boys keyboardist and close friend of Larry, Michael De Benedictus, Trocadero DJ from San Francisco, Bobby Vitouš, ex-Billboard dance reporter and disco music aficionado Brian Chin, plus the voice that danced his way into millions of hearts for 30 years as lead singer of the incredible group First Choice, the once in a lifetime Michelle Fleming, interviewed by Lenny Fontana.